Thank you so much for finding us. Thank you for listening to Whitehall Sources. It is great to be with you, and thank you. Make us a regular part of your routine. Follow this podcast, subscribe to the podcast, wherever you're listening now, and leave us a review. The reviews are stacking up, actually. They're largely positive, which is nice. There's a couple of criticisms in there, which we just ignore. So leave a positive review as well. You can find us on social media. Search for Whitehall Sources. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on TikTok as well. You get extra clips on there. Something which, by the way, forced me to go and change my shirt a minute or two ago, because we were all wearing black t-shirts. And we're not in mourning for anything in particular, so I've now got a green shirt on. So you can see that on TikTok and Twitter and Instagram. And our inbox is always open. We're going to read your messages later in the correspondence unit. The email address is hello@whitehallsources.com. Since we last spoke, which by the way was a week ago, things have really calmed down, which is potentially welcome. Oscar.
Very, very welcome. When we initially agreed to do this podcast, the agreement was once a week, Calum, and I think we've... How many have we done now? Is it 7?
This is number 8. We're recording number 8.
Yeah, completely ridiculous. And it actually, we were just saying off air, the kind of the media obligations is like a talking head that I've kind of taken on over the last few weeks. I began to feel quite disorientated by it. Just kind of going in every day into a different green room, kind of talking about the latest kind of political calamity. And it's actually been really, really... And I'm sure this is how the general public feel, probably. Just, it's quite nice to have politics in a box a little bit, kind of where it should be, rather than kind of the ongoing soap opera that it just felt completely relentless.
Yeah.
It's been a much steadier week, I think.
I mean, it was steadier, and then of course this happened. And I'm sorry to have to do this, but this is, of course, the I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here theme tune. Matt Hancock is being deported to Australia, Kirsty. Is this welcome news that we're finally shipping him off?
I mean, look, I just think if you are needy enough to want to go on national television and eat camel's anus and be locked in a box with, rats and cockroaches, I think kind of good luck to you. Someone said yesterday there are good midlife crises and bad midlife crises, and this is clearly the latter. But I mean, and this is the thing with Matt Hancock. He's got this kind of image of himself as a nice guy, and he can't understand why he's become a sort of national pariah. And I think this is mainly, he's got a book coming out and he wants to raise awareness for dyslexia, fine. But this is really about, as far as I can work out, him going on TV and going, look, I'm nice, everybody love me, see how nice I am. And I just think, look, I mean, that's kind of, for me personally, okay, fill your boots, good luck with the whole, Bush Tucker trials, which you will be voted for every single one. But I think, look, if you're a constituent of his and he's supposed to be a serving MP, I think if you are sat at home right now worrying about how you're going to heat your home and feed your kids this winter, I think this is much less funny. I think if you're a health worker or a care worker that endured everything that they had to endure during COVID, this is downright insulting. And I think if you lost a loved one, particularly if you lost a loved one in a care home, after Matt Hancock promised that a protective arm would be thrown around our care homes, I would be probably, incandescent with this. This is crass beyond measure. If, you have a perspective where COVID was, life-altering for you and you lost people or you endured a level of suffering that no human being should ever have to endure. So, look, as far as I'm concerned, he can do it. A free country, but I think for a lot of people in this country, it's really, really upsetting.
Is there anything to be said for the principle of the idea of a politician trying something alternative to communicate a message and to connect with people in all of this, though?
Penny Mordaunt, I think it was 2014, did Splash. Yeah. Now, she did Splash to raise money to save the local Lido, and which succeeded, I think. And kind of hats off to her on that. I then inherited her at the department I was working at the time as the High Streets Minister. And in terms of profile raising and the capacity to do good because you've been on telly and people have seen you, I mean, she was a very junior minister when I worked with her at DCLG. And we'd just launched the Great British High Street Award, of which I'm sure you're both familiar. A marvellous competition. And it is I mean, look, there's prizes in there for winners of the competitions, but it was really all about, celebrating the Great British High Street and encouraging people to go to the High Street and use it. And Penny had just joined, she was a very junior minister. Apart from Splash, she'd have had like zero profile at all. And at the time, our comms campaign budget was £0 and 0 pence. So I put Penny on this punishing tour of, every town and every high street across Britain in the summer. And every single, local media outlet, broadcast outlet wanted to talk to her because she'd been on Splash. And cue loads of headlines about the minister making a splash on the high street, etc. So it actually worked in her favour. She saved a local Lido. She highlighted a fantastic campaign and raised awareness of how brilliant our high streets are. So you can do it and do it well, but this is not an example of doing it well.
I suppose the principles of that and doing Splash probably didn't take her away from constituency work. It wasn't international. It was something that she could potentially do alongside actually being an MP, whereas I'm a Celebrity removes Hancock from all of that. But what do you think, Oscar, on this? Because I'm quite taken by the idea that politicians should do things that are a bit different to get attention and sort of break with tradition.
Well, definitely. I mean, going back to how we started off the podcast this week, he's been hit quite hard, I think, by a relatively slow political news cycle. I think, if you'd gone back a couple of weeks, I mean, I think it opened the 6 o'clock news. Yeah. When everyone found out about this, that would never have happened a couple of weeks ago. So he's been hit quite hard by that. All the talk shows about it, talking about it, front page headlines, opening up the news, 6 o'clock news, as I said. So that's kind of put a spotlight on it. And from his perspective, very damaging and exposing one that wouldn't have been there a couple of weeks ago. So I think that's quite unfortunate for him. And I don't know if him and his team had control over when it was announced he was going on or not. But if they had an element of control on it, they've made a bit of a mistake there. You probably want to slip that one in, or at least prepare people that you were going on a couple of weeks back. I think there potentially lies the answer, though, where he wasn't given a cabinet position by Rishi. He wasn't brought back into government. And that's why I think he's accepted to go on. I mean, he kind of made a bit of an error by telling people that he'd rejected it twice already, the show, and this was the third time they asked him, and he's finally yielded and said, yes, I'll go on. And the two, for me, in terms of not being invited back into government and then finally accepting, are 100% linked. I think that if he had said, my time, and he could hold his hands up, and I think he could plausibly say, I led this country as health secretary through an unprecedented challenge that hadn't happened 100 years before and may not happen in 100 years for another 100 years. And mistakes were made, but there were some achievements that I'm very proud of. I am now leaving politics, and then do the show. And I think people would be like, oh, good luck, and it just wouldn't have had the same inflammatory reaction.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point.
So I think having his cake and eating it isn't really working for him. The only thing I would say,
cakeism again, it is always bad.
Yeah, and I have to say he's going to be dreaming of cake over the next couple of weeks, I should think. Jeepers.
But the thing is here that I think why a lot of MPs have got quite jumpy about this, and as someone who's worked for a backbench MP, it's quite revealing what's happened here, because the uncomfortable truth that I haven't heard people talking about a lot is that if as a backbench MP you have really good staff and an experienced caseworker, and a caseworker, for people who don't know, is someone who works in the MP's office who will deal with the really, really difficult processy issues that constituents go to an MP about, like, it could be anything, could be like trouble with paying bills, or, you know, links with local councils, outreach services. It could be, you know, just the real... MPs don't really do that. So when you email your MP, it won't be your MP who's following up 9 times out of 10. It will be their experienced caseworker. So the idea that Matt Hancock being in Australia means that he is completely surrendering his constituents to a lack of service, the uncomfortable truth in that is that he's not, because his office will be doing that. So it will be normal business. As far as I'm aware, the only thing he can't do whilst he's in the jungle is, unless he has he's obviously, you know, a voting, he can even vote because he can do a pairing system, is that he can't, you know, stand in the chamber and, you know, and this, there is a problem with this, and this isn't, you know, and, you know, put pressure on the government for local constituency issues by standing up and, you know, and making statements in the chamber. Apart from that, I can see why maybe arrogantly he thinks I can go off to Australia and my office will do the rest.
Interesting. Yeah, but taxpayers don't, you know, aren't or shouldn't be paying for him to, you know, not do his job and go to the other side of the world to massage his ego and raise his profile. I mean, you know, this is an exercise in Matt Hancock trying to rehabilitate Matt Hancock in the eyes of the British public. You know, on the taxpayer's dime. I just think it's a bit extraordinary.
His rehabilitation tour has been ongoing for quite some time and started way back when with this absolute gem.
I resigned because I broke the social distancing guidelines.
Yeah.
By then they weren't actually rules, they weren't the law, but that's not the point. The point is they were the guidelines that I'd been proposing. And, you know, that happened because I fell in love.
If kangaroo balls won't make you sick, then Matt Hancock talking about falling in love certainly will. I was also going to bring you this, which is from The Sun and reported in Political this morning, Political Playbook. Hancock could be saved from some of the toughest tasks thanks to his apparent rotting foot, according to The Sun. The paper claims Matt Hancock got trench foot while filming another game show in recent weeks, Celebrity SAS Who Dares Wins, and it might not have cleared up, meaning water-based tasks or swimming trials in the jungle could be out of the question.
Oh, this is the problem that he's going to face. This is the problem. So you fight your battles to get on the show, and the huge political fallout, and Kirsty's kind of hit the nail on the head countlessly in terms of how the public will have received the news that he's going on. But then once he's actually on the show, he must be so kind of inherently confident that he one is going to be completely game, and secondly that he is going to come across as a likeable person, and that is... I don't know him at all, Kirsty. I don't know if you do, but like that makes me really nervous on his behalf.
I mean, you know, I'm sure he's going to do that, and I don't know about you. I'm desperately trying to get the idea of Matt Hancock's trench foot out of my mental imagery.
I'm trying to get the idea of him in love out of my mental imagery.
This is before we get the actual images of him chowing down on camel's anus and kangaroo's penis, but all sorts of lovely images of Matt Hancock floating through our minds right now. What was the point? I completely lost my point.
You were going to consider...
Oh God! My mind is now so full of...
How likeable is he?
Animal parts and trench foot. I can't think straight.
His likability. And I would actually, to tee that up, when he does interviews with us on the radio, he is genuinely quite pleasant and genuinely quite up for it, and he does come across as a reasonably okay kind of person.
Sure, and look, and he's going to go on, and the expectation, I'm sure, from him will be that he'll be voted to do every Bush Tucker trial, and he'll be very game and up for the challenge. I think if the public really wanted to spite all this, they should vote him off at the first opportunity.